back to the beach. We begin today with the partying, the police response, and the perception that race plays a role.
From the very first days of spring break, the South Beach Entertainment District has at times looked like a wild party zone inside a police state. That law enforcement effort has at times been heavy-handed. Also, though, effective. More than 1,000 arrests and more than 100 guns have been seized. Damages closed many businesses and restaurants, and others were forced to close because of that 8 p.m. curfew.
But the perception that the heavy-handed response is race-related, that is our focus this week. Miami Beach's mayor and police chief categorically deny that. Our guests today believe otherwise. Stephen Johnson is the chair of the Miami-Dade County's Black Advisory Board that was first established in 1979. And Glendon Hall is the chair of Miami Beach's newly formed Black Affairs Advisory Committee. That's just about a month old. So great to have you both aboard.
Good morning, gentlemen. Glad you are here. Stephen Johnson, we know you well. You've been a guest here on the roundtable on This Week in South Florida. We're glad to see you and glad to meet Glendon Hall. Stephen, over the last couple of weeks, you've been very critical of Miami Beach Police. You've said that they were too aggressive in the way they responded to the young people who were acting out, mainly, predominantly black people. You said that it was, quote, a total overreaction by police. Why do you think so?
So if you look, Michael, at what was happening, Miami Beach Police Department is well trained at managing crowds and events. They've done it for years. And for over 20 years, we've had Memorial Day weekend in South Beach, and we've had spring break attended by black people in South Beach. However, this is the first year that, in addition to instituting a curfew, they enforced that curfew by spraying pepper balls at people who literally had no idea about the curfew. They did not wait to allow the goodwill ambassadors and people like Glendon who were there trying to clear the streets. They didn't wait. They overreacted to their job at the time. And while I disagree with instituting the curfew, that's the city of Miami Beach's right.
Yes, but Stephen, if I can, excuse me, let me just interrupt here. A little follow-up question here. I'll grant you, kids who are on spring break aren't watching the news. They are not reading newspapers. They're not necessarily reading on their phones what's going on, and they didn't know about the curfew. But the police were going down Washington and Collins, Ocean Drive, with loudspeakers saying there is a curfew in effect, 8 p.m., you've got to leave this area, and hundreds of them initially just refused to leave. The police say that's why they fired the pepper balls.
I don't know that that's accurate. And more importantly, you announced the curfew at 4 p.m. to take effect at 8 p.m. And at 9:30, you start shooting pepper spray into the crowd as though you're dispersing protesters. That's not appropriate. The people who were there were not necessarily the people that you were angry at for destroying property or for committing crimes. Those people, many of them, over half of them, were legitimately tourists who were there to enjoy their vacation. That's not hospitality, and that's not how you treat your tourists, Michael.
Okay, let me, there's a lot to unpack with what you just said, and what you, Stephen, are talking about is overreaction, duly noted. I think in the bigger picture, there's a much larger issue with not only reaction after the fact, but preparation before the fact, which was also very law enforcement intensive. But I want to bring Glendon Hall into the conversation. Beach businessman, beach resident, newly chair of this new advisory board. Glendon, first of all, great to meet you via Skype. And second of all, this issue that Miami Beach has been facing, and let me just put on the record, this is a great conversation that everyone should be having of every ethnicity, because we don't talk about this enough. I want to hear from you. Why now? Why is there a Black Advisory Board now, which is a great thing, but why not last year or 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago when the first Memorial Day big urban beach week, I think they used to call it, first happened?
Well, I think I give Mayor Gelber credit for this. He is a neighbor of mine, and I think he's a good man. He had the political will to actually put this together, institute this. And what we do, we provide a different perspective of, what's going on. And so too, a lot of people don't even realize that there is a Black community even on Miami Beach, which is kind of, kind of sad.
Okay, so the question though is, why now? Is it because of what has happened these 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Why?
No, this was set up before that even happened.
Ah, okay.
So this is not in a reaction to that. It may have been a reaction to things past that a perspective was needed on, I call it the 3 Ps: policy, programming, and procurement. To get the perspective from us of maybe ways to do things differently with a different vantage point.
All right, so Stephen, let me go back to where you were just a moment ago. Last week, we had the mayor, we had the police chief on this program. We talked all about this. The mayor said almost verbatim, we are targeting behavior, not people. And the deputy police chief, who was not on this program, Wayne Jones, who is a veteran Black police officer on Miami Beach, said almost those same things. The intention is behavior. And if you look at the city manager's rundown of a month, which we have here in memo form, more than 1,000 arrests, half of them from out of state, half of them, a third of them from within the vicinity, weapons and drugs and vandalism. There is no doubt behavior that police have been reacting to. So how do you take race to be part of that? And maybe not just age, maybe it's age and spring break kids being spring break kids, and then a couple of them take advantage of the mob related scene. Break down how that is perceived.
Happy to, Glenna, and thank you. So first of all, let's remember that the discussion around spring break and how the police were policing spring break did not start just last week. It started last year. The very last event that I went to was a press conference held by the NAACP decrying the police tactics used last year before the COVID-related shutdowns. I note that Mayor Gelber has said a lot, but one of the things that has concerned me is he said we should stop calling this spring break because these are not college kids. And as a formerly 25-year-old spring breaker who was actually completing their last year of undergrad, I can tell the mayor, listen, I don't know what your experience is, but the Black experience isn't necessarily 18 to 21 and finish college. So let's stop using the broad brush. My objection is the broad brush. My objection is also the paintball guns with pepper spray in them that have only come out when Black people go to the beach. Yeah. These are things I have a concern about, and hopefully we'll be able to discuss it with the chief, because if you properly prepare and program, you can actually have a successful event where you don't have crowds of people milled up at 8th and Ocean.
Yeah, Stephen, forgive me. We were just showing some video, you probably couldn't see it, of some of the really wild excesses of the last couple of weeks on South Beach. People dancing on top of cars, not their own cars, other people's cars, people twerking, stampeding crowds. I mean, really a chaotic scene, and predominantly the people in those pictures are Black. And I guess the question that I've got is, police reacted, they would have reacted if those were white kids who were doing it. Did they overreact because they were Black?
I can make a comment on that, please. I was actually embedded with PD multiple times during that week, and I was there Saturday night. So Miami Beach PD was doing a great job with the help of Officer Mitchell and some of the goodwill ambassadors that don't get highlighted. They were dispersing the crowd, they were calming things down, and all of a sudden the SWAT truck showed up from Coral Gables, unannounced. Even the officer who was with me didn't even know it was coming. So while we were calming people down, the SWAT truck actually elevated everything. It increased tensions. So our issue is, we have Ultra Music Fest that you have hundreds and hundreds of arrests, multiple fatalities. We even had a security guard almost killed but you never see a SWAT truck at Ultra. Yet it was engaged on the beach. And so nothing was occurring at that time that necessitated a SWAT truck, right?
And Mike,
they came out with the AR-15, started walking around. They weren't there to extract anybody. And all of a sudden, the media rushed to them. The media wasn't recording Officer Mitchell interacting with the revelers and they're hugging him and thanking him for moving things around. No, the media went right to that truck and basically said this statement that, oh, this truck has been there the whole day. It was there for an incident when actually it just showed up the last 35 minutes. So the goodwill ambassadors and officer, Miami Beach PD, did a great job that whole day calming everything's down. And it made them feel like they wasted all that time and energy because at the last minute, the SWAT truck showed up unannounced without them even knowing and changed the whole situation.
Yeah. All right, Stephen.
So when you bring out an AR-15, I mean, I'm a gun guy, right? I have a concealed weapon permit. I'm a gun guy. I get it, right? But when you bring out an AR-15, that shows deadly force. Deadly force for what? For twerking? I mean, it doesn't match up. We do not condone the activities, but all those activities are capital crime.
Understood. So you're talking about the atmosphere that was wrong from the get-go. Fair point. Hold on. We've got a break we got to do, and we'll be back in 2 minutes to pick this up right where we left off.
We are glad you were with us this morning. We are talking to Stephen Johnson, chair of the Miami-Dade Black Affairs Advisory Board, and Glendon Hall, who is the chair of the Miami Beach Black Advisory Board. Stephen Johnson, let me ask your opinion, get both of your opinions on this. We are told that the city of Miami Beach initially had set aside $1 million to provide money for events, for things for the spring breakers to do while they were here. And then they said, no, it's the era of COVID-19. We can't have events where people who won't be wearing masks are coming together like this, so they didn't spend the money. Stephen, was that a mistake? Should they have had planned events that would have given these kids something to do other than drink a lot and hang out on Ocean Drive?
It absolutely was a mistake, and I'll tell you why. If you wanted the kids to wear masks, you could have had an event and told them, put your masks on. If you wanted to control your crowds, because your hotels were at 100% occupancy, but your bars and restaurants were only at 50% occupancy, you have to give these crowds something to do. Left to their own devices, you end up with additional chaos. And I know that frustrates the people who live on Miami Beach. But what I don't like is that when it comes to Black events, this is always the case. Let's just throw extra money at policing. But if it's another event, if it's a food and wine festival, oh, let's throw plenty of money at that.
Well, Stephen, let me just, I've heard you say this before. There is a component of apples and oranges there because there are sanctioned events on the beach all over Dade County. Food and Wine is one of them. Art Basel, you've mentioned. There's the Jazz in the Garden in Miami Gardens, which actually our station has sponsored in the past. And that is a predominantly Black city and a predominantly Black event. All of these events are sort of corporate sponsored or corporate owned, and they're contractual, and they come in and they have to go by rules and security. And it's kind of a different thing, event, even though it's the same word, as a spring break, whether it's here or South Padre Island in Texas or wherever, where it's just a place where people come. And
but Glenn, that act, if you consider that Jazz in the Gardens is owned by the city of Miami Gardens. They created that event. If you know that you're going to have thousands and thousands of visitors coming to your city, and you want to be able to direct and disperse and control the crowd, you can do things, and we've been saying it for over 10 years, you can do things and have things to make people see other parts of your city. As Glendon has said in other times, you've got Mid Beach, you've got North Beach. There are other parts of the beach for people to explore so that they're not all compressed on South Beach. But it's not necessarily fair to compare Jazz in the Gardens to Miami Beach because sometimes Black folks, like everyone else, just want to go to the beach.
No, of course. And that wasn't a comparison at all of cities. It was comparison of events. And Glendon, is that doable? Do you think the city of Miami Beach would go out and get corporate sponsors and be in charge like Miami Gardens so successfully has of putting something like that on the beach?
Well, definitely. I mean, there was a time where the city of Miami Beach had a program called Respect the Scene. It was started like back in 2012, where they had, Adonis Haslam, Dwayne Wade, and other celebrities who had, marketing pitches, PSAs, even had cutouts on the beach that basically said, look, we welcome you here. We want you here, but just respect the scene, party responsibly. I mean, they did a lot of work on that and did a lot of networking with hotels and media, social media, and everything else to get the word out there. So it created the atmosphere that, look, we do want you here. You're welcome, but let's do the right thing. And also, too, as I mentioned before, I mean, this all encompasses even the goodwill ambassadors that are there. They don't get highlighted enough. These people work a tremendous amount of time and hours to actually keep the beach safe, not only for the residents, but also for the tourists, passing out masks, assisting them with, with bags and assisting them with, directions and everything else. And a lot of people don't see it. The media was there not to see that. They don't see the goodwill that's happening and the great interactions. In my opinion, they were only there to see something pop off, and that's what they got.
So I want, and maybe after the program, we can have a conversation, because that's the second time you talked about the media. We, the news media, report news. What is great and supposed to happen, technically by definition, is not news. So that's a whole conversation we can have also. But you had a question. Go ahead.
I'm going to tell you what I saw.
Let me ask you both. You're quite aware, 25 years ago, the city of Fort Lauderdale had a problem with out-of-control crowds. Those were almost exclusively white college kids who came down. They had seen where the boys are. They wanted, to hang out. And the city of Fort Lauderdale went into a huge program to discourage kids from coming down and misbehaving, and it's largely been successful. So what can the city of Miami Beach do to send out a message that it's glad to have peaceful visitors come, enjoy themselves, enjoy the city, but not misbehave? Glendon, what should the city do?
Well, the thing about it, I used to be involved with Fort Lauderdale. I mean, I was part of that. Back then you had, art stocks, playpen, pin rods. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, you had wet T-shirt contests. Those hotels wouldn't even maintain them because they knew that the place would get torn up. I mean, it was crazy. But what happened is the city started investing on A1A. They put in a whole new infrastructure, road improvements, the whole wave wall, and they actually changed the zoning and got some of those really bad, restaurants and bad establishments out, and really changed the type of businesses there. They got in companies, put in office space, everything else. So they actively changed the flavor. But
all right. So let me just jump in and say, then what should Miami Beach do? Should it really get more strictly into code enforcement? The restaurants on Ocean Drive or on Washington Avenue they're not lax there. They go in and enforce code regulations.
Michael, if I may, this conversation has evolved
into more of a Art Deco, a cultural district, and getting rid of, stores like, tattoo shops and the like, and head shops. I mean, things like getting rid of these golf carts and these zip cars and everything that zip around and making all this noise, and the scooters. I mean, those don't add to the ambience. It adds to the chaos. So they should be rezoning to get different businesses in there and actually focus on galleries, art, culture, rather than this bacchanal atmosphere. But the city needs to get involved with that and do it on an investment that they know it's not going to just take 1 year. It's going to take multiple years. Yeah. And it takes
it's a long-term process. Stephen, you wanted to jump in and make a comment. Go ahead.
I'm going to say, to the extent that we're talking about the black tourist and the black traveler, I don't want the city of Miami Beach to do anything to, quote unquote, discourage. And I think we need to get away from that discourage. If you want to encourage people to come, you curate a scene that they'll want to be a part of. And to me, it's very important that we include the black traveler from around the country and the world in that conversation. So anything that the city of Miami Beach does, they should prepare in advance for the crowds they're going to get. And I don't think that was the case here. And they should consider what words they're using and what language they're using and how it's going to be interpreted, because this particular curfew was literally the shot heard around the world. And everyone remembers the first boycott. I don't want to see that occur again, but we may find ourselves there.
That was, perception is reality. Such a great point. Sit tight. We got a little break to do, and we'll be right back. We are back talking about spring break on the beach with Stephen Johnson from Miami-Dade's Black Affairs Advisory Board, Glendon Hall from Miami Beach's newly formed Black Advisory Committee. Stephen, great point right before the break. Perception is reality to so many people. And I think the message that we are all sort of watching unfold is how people perceive how they are being treated. It seems like everybody's a little bit right and everyone's a little bit wrong, but I just want to talk about the geography for a minute. Miami Beach, as somebody mentioned before, is a pretty long place. I think it's like 7 or 9 miles. What we're talking about is a matter of blocks where all of this is going down. Super concentrated, super crowded. The steps that the Miami Beach Police Department have taken where crowds are concerned, the causeways, diverting causeways one way, sometimes closing them, that is not unprecedented. This has been done before. And I want to sort of, Stephen, hear you talk about what kind of extreme emergency crowd control would you find acceptable from Beach Police Department to control crowds, no matter when, no matter the emergency?
So there were a couple of things that have been mentioned before that I think were great ideas. For instance, if you wanted to control or were concerned about the transporting of weapons onto the beach, shut down your parking lots. And the city owns a lot of them, and they have a lot of spaces. You can do that quite easily. And what that does is that makes a traveler take an Uber or come from their hotel. But more than likely, under those circumstances, anyone who flew in didn't bring a pistol, right? So the weapons that you're finding connected to cars. You can control the cars. I don't have a problem with controlling the flow of traffic in order to keep things tamped down. There were a lot of people coming from the mainland and coming from West Palm that might not have had some of the same intentions as the travelers. There were things they could do without shutting down the entire causeway and inconveniencing not only those travelers, but also their own residents. That was amazing to me, to put the residents through that. Again, with 4 hours notice, God forbid you had a dinner party to go to last Saturday. You had a problem. We have to do better. And I'd also add, there was no crime that was committed that was outlandish. When I say outlandish, I mean they dealt with 400 arrests during Memorial Day.
Stephen, if I can jump in, forgive me. You're the excellent lawyer. I'm just a reporter. I mean, there was one outrageous crime, and I know you both would agree that the death of Christine Engelhardt, 24-year-old woman who was on the beach by herself, went back to her hotel with 2 guys. They gave her some kind of a green pill. They had sex with her, maybe against her will, and then she later died. I mean, that is just a tragic event. And
but that crime has nothing to do with the black tourist, and that crime is not a crime that has not, unfortunately, occurred on Miami Beach before. And we should not sit here and act as though we initiated this curfew to save that young woman, because we didn't. One thing has nothing to do with another, and it was a terrible crime. And like any other crime, I want it investigated, I want it prosecuted, I want all of those things, like everyone else does. But that has nothing to do with the black tourists coming to Miami Beach, and that has nothing. Except
to say that the 2 young men who are now accused of this heinous crime were both here, I believe, from North Carolina, on spring break,
The mass shooting in Colorado didn't have anything to do with those people who were born in Syria. That crime didn't have anything to do with anybody who happens to be black. That crime had to do with that woman and those individuals. And let's not confuse or conflate blackness with a crime.
All right.
Because
Stephen, it's an excellent point. Glendon Hall, you are heading this new committee. What are you going to do with the information? You've been out on the street. I'm sure other members have been out there. Are you going to go to the city commission and mayor and make a report? And what do you think you're going to say to them?
Well, we have recommendations. We have a meeting occurring actually on Tuesday. And I want to make a quick comment about Christine. I went to her vigil, and we, as I mentioned, and even Steve concurs, we don't condone any of that, right? And we share the pain of the family, but we cannot put a brush of all the people. I mean, most of the people who came down for this event, so when this time, were peaceful. We only have a small amount that was the problem, but yet they get the focus, unfortunately, and that's sad to see. So moving forward, we have a lot of different recommendations that will be invited to the commission. I mean, we have the American Black Film Festival, the Soul Vegan Fest that happens in North Beach, bringing Gumbe back possibly, but to the point where we made earlier, we can't just have it just concentrated in South Beach. We need to spread these activities around. These are good, family-friendly, cultural art events, but have them in Mid Beach, have them in North Beach. And if you have something even much larger, maybe we can partner with the county to maybe even have some things over at Harlover to distribute some of that emphasis of activities, but spread it around so it's not just concentrated on 10 blocks. People thinking all over the world that Miami Beach is falling off the cliff. But actually, the rest of the city is functioning correctly, but just these 10 blocks are having all the issues.
So Glendon Hall, Stephen Johnson, and your daughters in the background, who it's always great to hear from them. Great to speak with you both. And I feel like, as someone who likes to spread the love, I feel like when we keep talking about this, we can all find a solution. So let's all keep talking about that. Great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thanks, gentlemen. Really appreciate it.